The Kaduna State government has confirmed that 8 students were abducted along with other citizens when gunmen whisked away 10 victims from Government Day Secondary School in Awan Kasha local government area of the state. The government says they were not kidnapped in the school compound. According to a statement by the State Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs in Kaduna State, Samuel Arwan, says that the students were on their way home from school when they met the bandits who had abducted all the residents. Abduction is the latest onslaught launched by gunmen that have wreaked havoc in the northwestern state, despite the efforts of the state government and security agencies. Well, the Buhari government, since it got into office in 2015, has been battling with dismantling the non-state actors causing mayhem and killing innocent citizens in different parts of the country. Well, wherever you may be in the country, what are the security challenges that you are facing? Is it banditry? Is it terrorist situation in the northeast, or violent crime and issues of sit at home in north-southeast region? What are the issues you're facing? How can we fix this problem? And so someone will say, can we continue like this? Definitely not. We can't continue to live with insecurity. But what are the solutions? What are the real challenges that we are facing? Tonight, we dedicate a lot of time to discuss this. Now, a new government will be coming. A Buhari government will be handing over to a Tinubu administration. What are the challenges, the burden that the Tinubu administration will be dealing with? Tonight, I have an expert, 2 experts actually. I have the Director General of the Institute of Police and Security Policy Research, a lawyer, and a member of a presidential working group on police reform, Dr. Charles Omale. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And I also have with us a scholar on extreme terrorism and a scholar with the Tony Blair Foundation, Mr. Bulama Bukati is also a lawyer. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time tonight.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. We are faced with a lot, and you know, when we have this, the caliber of the 2 of you, yourself and Bulama, it does look to me that we might have some very purposeful conversation tonight. But give me an understanding. The Kaduna incident is there, the Northwest, and perhaps as you show our viewers some of the research work that's been done at the Tony Blair Foundation. Maybe can propel us to talk more about what we have seen over the last few years. These are the numbers of people that have been killed over the last few years. We do know, if you look at it right there on your screen, in the northwest and the north central region of the country, about 30,000 militias have emerged in the past few years. 100 groups in different, I mean, these 30,000 in different groups, and about 20,000 people have been killed since about 2016. Let's flip the page and look at some other figures that we have. Between 29th of May 2016 and 29th May 2022, 55,430 people were killed by terrorist groups and criminal gangs operating across the country. What more do we know? Let's flip the page. So look at how things have gone in terms of insecurity and the number of internally displaced people in Nigeria, which has been increasing since 2017. President Buhari got into office, Dr. Omale, and said, look, I want to tackle insecurity. But increasingly, we've seen the situation, moving and morphing into different kind of thing. What are we facing? Existential threats to our nation, or how would you describe it?
Well, thank you. I think the problem we have is government, not just this government, since 1999. Successive government have not really tackled the fundamentals of our insecurity. They are dealing with things at the top, but they are not going to the root and branch. Let me give you an example. You know, there are usually 2 security posture when it comes to civil security in any country. You see that you have the centralized security where you have, like, say, in terms of civil security, like national police, or you have a disaggregated system like you have in the United States where you have 18,000 police departments, where everybody have their own police departments. You see, the problem in Nigeria is we are not in either camp.
Where are we? Where do we
are in no man's land. Because we have, in quote, a centralized police. The Constitution says there can only be one police in Nigeria. Yet, if you look at what police do in other countries, you can map it against 9 different other agencies in Nigeria that do the same thing. So the police has been cannibalized.
A duplication of duty.
Overlapping mandates all over the place. You know, and National Assembly, successive ones, are part of the problem here. So you have a situation, in fact, I mean, there was a situation, many people might not be aware, in Kogi State, where civil defense took the police to court, saying that you're encroaching on our turf. You know, the appeal court ended up saying the police can do pretty much anything they like. So we have a situation where you have the Nigerian police that is backed by the Constitution. Then you have National Assembly creating policing-related agencies. I mean, in anywhere in the world, if you're a civil servant and you steal, they call the police. In Nigeria, we created a different agency, ICPC. You know, we've cannibalized the whole thing. And what that creates is we are not in the camp number 1 of centralized policing, because there are several federal duplicating agencies. We are not in the other camp of disaggregated ones where there are, you know, different policing departments. But the solution, even with that problem, the solution is we need an effective intelligence blanket, which we don't have in Nigeria. What I mean by that is, you know, the National Security Agencies Act, which, controls our security agencies and also relates to the Office of National Security Advisors. That law is outdated. But you know the problem? That law has now been embedded into the Constitution, which means to amend that act, you have to go through constitutional amendment instead of amending an act the way it should be amended. So we have a situation where we have an act that is not fit for purpose. We have security agencies that are competing instead of cooperating. So that's number 1, failure of intelligence. Number 2 is there is no effective early warning system in Nigeria. You know, there are technology solutions to make that possible. Number 3, because of time, you know, in terms of what is causing this problem, is the fact that, you know, we have, as a country, we have what's it called, round pegs in square holes in terms of people we appoint to several positions. Let me give you an example. Since 1999, all our national security advisors have been people from uniformed services. But the predominant national security problem we have is internal in nature, not external. We're not fighting any external war. If you go and look at the research in the US, say from 1930 to date, you find out that 55% of all the NSAs were civilians, experts in security. Only 45 are
more from intelligence sector
exactly.
And research, academic.
But we are doing the same thing in Nigeria. Bring a retired general, and our security is getting worse. So the new government needs to think out of the box and say, look, we need creativity here.
So we can't expect so much from Buhari government. So we are probably just trying to give some kind of agenda setting for the Tinubu presidency. Is that right?
That's correct.
Because as it is right now, just a few weeks, it's almost too late.
No, it's not almost, it is too late. I mean, there's nothing much that can be done by this government in terms of, securing the country. You know, the point is, have they tried? Yes. But the problem in Nigeria has always been we are focusing on kinetic security. We buy, firearms, buy jets, that has its place. But we all know that you don't win internal battles that way. You need to focus on the non-kinetics. You need to win hearts and minds. You need to deal with ungoverned spaces. And more importantly, you mentioned them earlier, you need to deal with several non-state actors that are all over the country. It's a major problem. Because once those non-state actors exist, it's difficult to get rid of them.
And we have a lot of cells across the country.
Over 100.
Even on our campuses, outside the campuses, around the campuses, we have different court groups.
You see, the challenge is this. Politicians will use some of this. The pattern is the same all over the world. The Americans, they trained Osama bin Laden, they no longer could control him. It became a problem for them. In Sudan, the Sudanese government trained the Janjaweed. Then I got to a point as mercenaries. They no longer could control the Janjaweed. That fall happened. The same thing in Nigeria. We start with the Niger Delta. You have the politicians use these thugs, harm them to win political elections. They won the election. These guys were left with guns. What can we do? That's how the militancy started in Niger Delta. You know, same thing come up north. The same thing, politicians use people to win elections You know, that's the core Boko Haram. You see, the idea that Boko Haram is a religious
fundamentally,
entity
yeah,
is false. It's only partly correct. You know, let me give you an example. There was a report I was reading where a guy was captured as a Boko Haram combatant. Why did he join Boko Haram? He said the man was having an affair with his wife. This is the north in Borno State. He said the man was having an affair with his wife. He went to report it to the police. But because the man was more powerful, the police arrested him, the husband. Instead, he was put in jail for 30 days. He said he vouched that when he left that prison that he would join Boko Haram, the first place he would attack is that police station. And that's exactly what he did. After he joined Boko Haram, the first place he attacked was that police station. Now, was I Muslim fundamentalist? No. So that, you know, Boko Haram is almost like a broad church, bringing all kinds of people. Yeah, there are religious elements to it. So we can't just deal with this thing purely on the kinetic level.
I mean, if you were Bola Tinubu, the president-elect, how worried would you be?
I'll be worried in terms of what I'm inheriting, but the solutions are also easy.
Does he even know? Because that's another issue. That people who are coming into government, who are taking the baton, are not totally aware of the situation, and they get into office and they are overwhelmed. They don't even know where to start, but because they don't know the enormity of the problem.
Okay, 2 years ago, the House of Reps did a National Security Summit. In fact, the #1 recommendation in that summit was that the police should have 1,000 officers in every state trained to be proactive standby force. In case there's a problem, they go there. That has not been implemented. So what happens? There's an attack somewhere, then they begin to mop up officers from different police stations. How many officers do you have? We have 2. Okay, send them. By the time you mop up officers around Abuja, the crime has been committed, the person has left. So we have this reactive posture, which has to change. Every nation must have a standby unit in every state.
America has a National Guard. If there is a national disaster, a national emergency, they bring them in.
Even if we bring it to the lower level in the US, they have the SWAT team. The SWAT team in the US, they don't do day-to-day policing. They don't even leave their station. They train every day unless they're on duty.
And so, they move on a tactical level.
Exactly. They call them, there's a problem, they go. But when it happens in Nigeria, you see our police start calling different police stations. How many people do you have? Because we don't have the personnel.
Just a moment.
So we're too reactive.
Yeah, I'll come back to you. There are a lot that I need to extract from you tonight, Doc. But let me go to Mr. Bulama, who's done also a lot of research on extremism and terrorism issues around. Man, I extracted some of the figures from a report. Some of the information we reeled out earlier from a report that came out of your research and that of the Blair Foundation. Give us an understanding of the enormity of what we are facing, because I like to also paint this picture so that we can know, and the government that is on the sideline waiting to come into power, know exactly what they're up against and how to deal with it. So we're setting an agenda. Give us the enormity of the problem that we have on our hands, Mr. Bukati.
Well, thank you very much. Security is unfortunately a very serious challenge for Nigeria. There are 3 main armed groups, as we know. The Boko Haram crisis in the northeast is still raging on. The northwest is battling, and the northwest and the north central are battling with the bandits crisis, but also communal issues in some states. And then you have the situation in the southeast, where you have the Eastern Security Network, or the unknown gunmen, unleashing havoc in that part of the country. If you look at it, Sheun, the Nigerian military is deployed to over 90% of Nigeria, and therefore you can say Nigeria is a country at war with itself without formal declaration. We are at war with ourselves without formal declaration, because the military is only expected to fight when there is war, but it is the military that is deployed everywhere in Nigeria. From the data you projected, under the Buhari administration in the first 7 years, from 2015 to 2022, over 55,000 Nigerians have been killed. And as we speak today, over 1.4 million Nigerians are displaced. They are internally displaced people, but there is also a large number in Cameroon, in Chad, and Niger, Nigerians displaced and becoming refugees in neighboring countries. Now, of course, the Kaduna attack is one. but it is a reminder, the attack on students in Kaduna is a reminder that education is under attack in Nigeria. These students are reported to be returning home from school. Just imagine, Shewin, this happened on Monday. On the Tuesday that students are walking to school or back from school, how do you think they would walk or back from school? I am sure many will not even go to school. And for those who would turn up to school, they would be petrified. And effective teaching and learning can never take place under a situation of fear, under atmosphere of fear. We have seen attacks on over 10 schools over the past 18 months or so. As we speak, 11 students of the federal government, Birni Nyawuli in Kebbi State, 11 of them are still in the captivity of their horrific kidnappers 22 months after they have been abducted. 2 students of the Federal University, Gusau, were abducted a few days ago. Education is under attack. Our roads are not safe. Our homes are not safe. Villages are devastated. Some of the villages, hundreds of them, are under the control of Boko Haram or bandits or the Eastern Security Network or the unknown gunmen, as they are called in the Southeast. Nigeria is in a very, very serious situation, and this insecurity is potentially going to be an existential threat for our country unless and until it is handled with the care and the seriousness it needs.
So if you look at, so I like to measure things so that we know where we're coming from and where we are and where we are headed. Now, if you look at over 1.4 million, like you mentioned, that have been internally displaced in Nigeria in different parts, and you have talked about almost 55,000 Nigerians that have been killed just within the time President Buhari got into office. So I then look at it, for those who have criticized that there hasn't been enough done in terms of manpower that have been given to our different security agents, for example, the military. And there is a commitment made by the Buhari government that is going to empower and spend a lot of money. We saw the purchase of Super Tucano aircraft from the United States. That is on one hand. We've sought different kind of purchase agreement with several other parties across the globe. But you look at how much that have been spent, the efforts that are being put into this, does it in any way have any effect on the activities of these violent gunmen or attackers?
So to be fair to Buhari, he made headway in the fight against Boko Haram. When he came in, Boko Haram's bombs were literally raining in many states in northern Nigeria, especially bombs in Abuja, bombs in Kaduna, bombs in Kano, Borno and Yobe, and all over the place. And the Buhari administration did well by tackling Boko Haram's bombings and, you could say, confining the group to the northeastern part of Nigeria, and we do not no longer see their attacks in the northwest, unfortunately, except that they have recently expanded to the north central and even parts of the northwest. Now, while Buhari was tackling Boko Haram, the bandits or the bandit gangs in the northwest and the north central became deadlier and more sophisticated. And that it was under the Buhari administration that we started seeing abduction of whole schools, abduction of whole villages, abduction of groups of individuals. Before the Buhari administration, there were kidnappings, isolated cases of kidnappings, and we know that these people ran away when they had the gunshots or the siren of police officers. But today, they have attacked the Nigeria Defense Academy. They have attacked our train line from Abuja to Kaduna. They have attacked, they have brought down Nigerian Army helicopter, Nigerian Air Force helicopter. So you could say this situation within the Northwest and the North Central exacerbated under the Buhari administration. And of course, it was under the Buhari administration that IPOP or the Eastern Security Network picked up arms. And so you could say there was some headway made in one part of Nigeria, some progress in the Northeast, and Boko Haram is still deadly. I need to emphasize that, but it has been much more weakened. It has been weakened very much under the Buhari administration, and then the bandits have become more, and the Eastern Security Network has picked up arms. Now, that's one thing. When it comes to what the Buhari administration promised in terms of security, of an estimated 210 million people, but if you put together our police and military, they are in the range of 400,000. Much has been made about the numbers, but what some people don't consider, and I think Dr. with him, is that we have 17 security and law enforcement agencies in Nigeria. It's not just the police and it's not just the police and the army. We have 17 security and law enforcement agencies in Nigeria. And if you counted their number, they are in the range of 1 million security forces, an estimated million security and law enforcement agencies if you put all of them together. But the problem is lack of synergy and cooperation between the security and law enforcement agencies, 17 of them or so, even though all of them are under the federal government, even though all of them are answerable to one person who is the president, but they do not synergize and cooperate. They act in silos. Sometimes they compete, and sometimes the competition is unhealthy.
If you have your way, Mr. Bukati, would you be suggesting that they should be morphed into one as the police? Because
no, I don't think they should be brought into one, but I think there should be one-stop agency for all of them. They should be brought together. They should develop one security policy, and they should work together and pursue Nigeria's security together. Of course, each of them have their own roles. I will just give you one example. One agency we don't emphasize enough are immigration and customs. Sheun, the three ingredients of insecurity in Nigeria are drugs, guns, and ultra-powerful motorbikes. None of them are made in Nigeria. All of them are imported into Nigeria from other countries. And most of them are imported illegally. Drugs are illegal. Guns are illegal. Even motorbikes, some of them are illegal in some states of Nigeria, but they are imported into our country because our borders are porous. And therefore, what you need is to build up the capacity of our immigration and custom. When it comes to logistics and communication, you need to do more with regards to the army. But what you need to build more is the police. None of our security agencies is as burdened as the police. The police is the most burdened in terms of responsibilities, amongst our security and law enforcement agencies. And unfortunately, they are the most deprived when it comes to money, logistics, training, and employment of qualified persons. And unless and until you get the police right, you will never get Nigeria's security and law enforcement right.
Now, I have so many questions. I'm a bit overwhelmed right now, and I'm so emotional about the situation of things. It is not that we do not have the numbers and the boots on the ground. Over 1 million, although there are those who will argue that 1 million or so security officers across the country are not enough for over 200 million people. That ratio is highly insufficient. That's what some people will argue. But you have done a lot of research in terms of extremism. I mean, do we have a sense of realization on how to deal with this problem? Because I understand that sometimes these things are based on issues of how our societal breakdown, and that's how these extremist tendencies grow. Is there any active realization on how to deal with this?
Yeah, there is. The first one is that we must use the kinetic approach. And that's because these extremist or terrorist groups are killing innocent civilians and destroying their homes without any cause. And if a group is using arms against civilians, the state has no option but to use force against them. But force enough is necessary, but force is necessary, but force enough is not sufficient. And that's why you need to address the socio-economic and political grievances of these groups. For example, Dr. mentioned the Boko Haram crisis. He is right to say not all Boko Haram fighters are ideologically motivated. But I mean, the leadership of Boko Haram is ideologically motivated. And if you look at the economic or agricultural principle of 80-20 ratio, it says 80% of the damage is done by 20%. And I can tell you the leadership of Boko Haram that is convincing young people to believe that killing innocent people is not a crime, but a religious right, is the glue that holds Boko Haram together. And unless and until you address them, you cannot address those who are using Boko Haram's clothes or using Boko Haram's name in order to commit crimes and to loot money. And so I think addressing the ideology is very important. And I think in that you need to work with mainstream imams and religious leaders and community leaders, even traditional rulers, to address that. And to address that, what you need to do is to prevent recruitment. Preventing recruitment requires imams working with young people to make them understand that the Boko Haram version is a false, twisted, perverse version of Islam.
It does look to me that there needs to be a broadening and a wide range of approach to solving this problem. But then we need to have the political will to be able to resolve this issue. I'll be coming to you in a moment, Dr. Omale, but we need to take a breather. I'll be right back. For staying with us on the program, we have Dr. Charles Omale, a lawyer and a very, very sound security and intelligence press expert. And of course, Mr. Bulama Bukati, who is also a lawyer and a scholar on extremist and security issues. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. Intelligence. So some will say that is a major, that's in fact that is our Achilles heel in this regard. Do you agree?
Oh, yes. I remember, was it 2-3 years ago, all the commissioners of police in Nigeria, all the AIGs and the DIGs, they gathered in Lagos. I was one of the people that trained them. And I was training on intelligence-led policing. And I remember one of the AIGs who was in charge of force intelligence took me up on an issue that, oh, no, when I was saying that we don't have sufficient informants, we were unable to infiltrate many of these groups. And he said, oh, we can. Then I asked him, how many informants actively do you have right now? He said, none. I said, so a whole Nigerian police, you don't have a single informant? This was 2-3 years ago. He said, no. He said, but we can get people to use as informant if we need to. For me, that would answer the question. Again, reactive rather than proactive. You know, the last leader of Boko Haram that was killed, the intelligence report said that he was actually killed by 2 of his bodyguards. That report now said that those 2 bodyguards were actually planted by ISWAP into Boko Haram 3 years earlier. So you have ISWAP who penetrate and infiltrate Boko Haram for 3 years. A whole Nigerian nation cannot. I mean, they make some of you, they make mockery of us as though we don't have intelligence. Every terrorist organization in the world that have been defeated, there's always the use of penetrators and informants. Why are we not using that? Because our security agencies are busy with procurements and they are busy with competing and building their own empire and competing with one another. The new coming administration needs to put the nation first and understand that these people, they must work together. Now, what needs to happen is that we need to throw an intelligence blanket over all these agencies. How was it done in the US? I told you they have 18,000 police departments. After 9/11, they discovered that all the terrorists were in one database or the other of different security agencies. So they created the Department of Homeland Security. Now, when Homeland Security was created, every single police department in the US, all 18,000 plus of them, were instructed to store their data in a particular format. Every day, you don't even need anybody to interact. Homeland Security goes and mops up data. So if they arrest you in Texas and they input you into the system, in 24 hours, Homeland Security will know you've been arrested in Texas. Nobody needs to tell them. They just mops up that data on a daily basis. And they are in a position to join the dots. For example, you go to Texas, Mr. X, you buy 20 kilograms of fertilizer. Texas, as far as they are concerned, only 20 kilo. But you go to 7 other states to buy the same 20 kilo. Homeland Security will join the dots. And so hold on, this Mr. X is buying in several states.
And this is an ingredient for
bombs. So they will join the dots and say, oh, something is wrong here. A single state police couldn't join that dots because all they know is what happens in their precinct. So that is what we don't have in Nigeria. We don't have that intelligence blanket.
An intelligent intelligence network.
Yes. So if you, I mean, I just don't want to, sometimes I don't like talking, but it looks as though we are washing our dirty linen. You can leave the prison in Sokoto tomorrow and go into Lagos to go and join the Nigerian police. They won't find out because you would self-declare.
There is no records to check.
Look, I went to again, I'm talking of years ago, things could have improved. I went to the fingerprint center of Nigerian police in Lagos 4 years ago. Everything was in filing cabinet. They were using magnifying glass to read the what's it called, fingerprint. And I asked the commissioner, who is a friend, who was leading, I said, I was not complaining. He said, everybody that is sentenced to prison, the prison service is supposed to send their fingerprint and details to them so that they capture that. I said, when was the last time you received anything from the prison? He said, 5 months ago. So, look,
there's a lot of loopholes.
There's so lot loopholes everywhere.
The system is, there's no digital trace,
no tracking,
no record, virtually nothing to work with.
And these are things that have been done.
I mean, I just
in other
hope
places.
that the government or those who are trying to come into power are listening, because these are also important for our nation. Because a nation that is battling with insecurity will have a problem concentrating on national development.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be backward as long as we're not putting attention into the right places. If there is something that needs to be done, Dr. Mali, you said that it's almost too late for the Buhari government, who has said that it wants to perform magic before, that Nigerians will be shocked at what they will do with security before they leave office. But if we are focusing on the incoming government, which is the Bola Tinubu and his team, what do you think that they need on the very first day of office for Nigeria to know that they are serious? What would you be asking them to do?
Well, I would first of all want them to focus on who they appoint into security portfolios. Enough of people with purely kinetic experience. We need people with intelligence and general internal security experience.
And research-based security.
Exactly, evidence-based, yes. Yeah. That's number one. Because in Nigeria, I've said many times, we don't have intelligence-led policing, we have police-led intelligence. Police will arrest you first and gather intelligence rather than the other way around. That's number one. Number two, they need to reform the intelligence architecture. Generally, on paper right now, the National Security Advisor, his office supposed to be the coordinating point for, there's a National Joint Intelligence Board. But again, I don't know the current data now. That's 3 years ago when I looked at it, that board, they don't meet. So it's just like National Policing Council. That's on the law says that the president consults the National Policing Council before appointing IG. We know that never happened in many times ago. Maybe this last one it happened, but successive president just wake up and sack IG. So there are several things that are not being implemented. So number one, right personnel. Number two, a major reform of the intelligence network. And number three, you need to digitize our security infrastructure. Yeah. That's important.
Let me go to Mr. Bukati. Now, so we're looking at what needs to be done, and we're setting an agenda for the Buhari government. I mean, the Tinubu government, because according to Dr. Mali, it's almost too late in the day for the Buhari government to do anything if they have not done in the last 8 years. Well, what would you be asking them to do urgently because of some of these problems? You highlighted Northwest and North Central as the hotbed of some of these kidnapping and some of these extremist activities.
Look, if you are talking about the Buhari administration, I think they only have 2 months. I would be surprised if they achieved anything substantial in 2 months that they did not achieve in 7 years and 10 months. But I think they still have a role to play in the 60 days that we have. If you remember, the 2015 election was delayed by 6 weeks because the security forces said they could not guarantee the security of the polls. And in the 6 weeks that it was postponed for, the Jonathan administration made substantial progress in the fight against Boko Haram in the northeast. And so I think the Buhari administration can do something in the 8 or so weeks that they do have. And the least they could do is to hold the situation as it is so that things would not continue to exacerbate before the Tinubu administration comes in. As for the Tinubu administration, the first thing the Tinubu administration needs to do is for them to hit the ground running. You remember, Shewan, that when Buhari became president, insecurity was so endemic in our country, but he took 6 months to appoint ministers. And Nigeria is so complex a country that it cannot be run by one man, but Buhari tried to run it as a one-man show for 6 months. We cannot afford that under the Tinubu administration. And therefore, what I would urge the Tinubu presidency to do is to nominate ministers within the first 3 weeks of the administration, because we need them to do things urgently. The second thing is for them to recognize that there are 3 key challenges. There are many challenges, but there are 3 big challenges before the Tinubu-Shetima administration. The first one is security. The second one is national unity. And the third one is the economy. All of these 3 are interlinked because poverty and unemployment contribute to insecurity. Insecurity exacerbates poverty and unemployment. And where you have poverty and unemployment and insecurity, the country gets divided. For example, the young people on social media that are fanning the flames of division and hate would not be able to do that if they have good paying jobs. They would be focusing on their jobs, they would be their family, they would be focusing on their family, and therefore they need to focus on these 3 things: security, national unity, and the economy. And I think that's very important. When it comes to bolstering the security capacity of our security and law enforcement agencies, one thing that the Tinubu administration needs to do urgently is for them to seriously consider the role of the federal government in security and law enforcement vis-a-vis the role of the states. Let them seriously consider, does the federal government want to continue to retain exclusively the powers of law enforcement in Nigeria, or do they want to delegate some of the functions to states? And if they are going to do that, what functions? How will the architecture work? How would you avoid conflicts between the state and the federal government or among states? That's very important to be decided. And number 2, the Tinubu administration needs to bring governors on board. Because as we speak, I cannot remember one meeting by the Buhari administration between the federal government and the states in the Northwest to bring all of them on board on security and law enforcement. And that's why the Zamfara state governor started issuing amnesty to bandits, while the Katsina state governor said, no, we are not going to issue amnesty, and then said we are going to issue amnesty, while the Kaduna state government said, no, there is no dialogue with bandits or kidnappers. Remember, Shewan, that all of these crimes, kidnapping, possession of firearms, and armed robbery, all of them are federal offenses. Of course, armed robbery has been made a state offense under the Robbery and Firearms Act, but states are usurping the powers of the federal government, and the federal government is not saying anything because they know that they have failed. And because there is no coordination and synergy between the states and the federal government. And I think the Tinubu administration will do well to bring everyone on board, the governors on board in this fight.
Gentlemen, we need to close now. So I have 1 minute apiece. And this is when I said it to Dr. Omole during the break, he almost fell off his chair. And I like to also anchor, and I like to know, I'm very inquisitive, what do we do with our satellite ability? I know sometimes that we bought space in the satellite, and what are we using it for? There was an operation by the United States on Nigerian soil to extract an American that was being abducted by terrorists. And that was done successfully. America has done it in the case of Osama bin Laden. They went in there and did all they needed to. They did it also recently under the Biden administration. Under the Trump administration too. In terms of satellites and digitally, remotely controlled operation and tactical operation in that sense, what can we do in 60 seconds to wrap up the conversation with you, Mr. Bulama?
Yeah, I think there is a big role for technology, and the Nigerian security and law enforcement system needs to be digitized, as Dr. Omole has made the case for. And intelligence-driven security is what is reigning in the world. You can't continue to do things uphead when it comes to security and law enforcement. But two important things in addition, Sheun, is the need for bilateral and multilateral security and intelligence cooperation with our neighbors. You cannot defeat Nigeria's insecurity without cooperating actively with Cameroon, Niger, and Chad. And finally, corruption, misappropriation of funds, and mismanagement of funds is endemic in our security and law enforcement sector. Right. And that has got to be addressed. You cannot make any progress if you do not flush out corruption and mismanagement of resources.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mole. Just 60 seconds in that regard, the question I asked.
Well, I mean, in terms of intelligence, I mean, the infrastructure is already there in the country for that to be done. But I, again, lay emphasis on the soft power Nigeria have and on the non-kinetic stuff. For example, what stopped all the states that have borders with external borders in Nigeria? What stops those governors, for example, making French a compulsory language? As a nation, all our neighbors, they're all French speaking. So part of soft power is be able to understand what's happening on the other side. So we have to think, asymmetric, in the way we attack this, not just about raw power alone, but clearly, yes, there's a place for intelligence reform. There's a place for, there's a place for, more of the non-kinetic stuff. Right. And then, of course, economic development in our community.
We're totally out of time. If you are to recruit more police, because a lot of people said we need more police, what number do you think will be sufficient?
I don't think we need more police officers. I'm controversial in that, because if you look at it, in the United Kingdom, for example, in the last 15 years, they've been reducing the number of the armed forces because they've said that the wars of the future will not be fought by boots on the ground. It's going to be fought by technology. So really, we don't need physically more. The most secure nations on earth have the lowest police-to-people ratio. So it's not just about numbers. It's about how we use the ones we have.
I will drag you back. If you need me dragging you by the trouser, yourself and Mr. Bulama, we need to convoke a national security summit on this program at some point. And I hope that it's been beneficial for everyone who has listened tonight, because we try to target the incoming government and give them a template on how to run in terms of national security. But thank you so much, Mr. Bukati and Dr. Mole. Thank you so much indeed,
Thanks for having me.